You are watching Xirtus.
Oh
Yes,
my
the
God.
Enlightenment thinkers grounded a bunch of philosophy that eventually became this. We are living under the ideas that were developed in the mid 1700s to early 1800s. And there are some fundamental problems with the ideas that were developed then because they didn't have a concept of embodied cognition. Embodied cognition means that a whole bunch of our thinking is literally based on our bodies. That's why Lakoff entitled it Philosophy in the Flesh, because we
Hmm.
are in the flesh. Now, the
So like
most
anthropic epistemology, everything we have is defined by our measurement, our sensors or whatever.
Yeah. And I actually asked Gemini for some advice earlier on what single idea I should use as the intro to make this pivot. And Gemini's opinion was that examining the correspondence theory of truth would be the best place to start. And the basic idea behind the correspondence theory of truth is that statements that we make in language correspond to some objective aspect of reality. And that whenever we are making a statement, the truth or falsehood of the statement is based on whether or not the statement accurately reflects the external reality to the language. But that really ignores the fact that the word truth is itself an embodied concept.
Exactly. Right.
And to get through that and actually get to some things, I want to give an example, a very concrete example. Xirtus, are you looking forward to this year coming up?
I'm looking forward to this year coming up. Yes.
Okay, now think about that statement. You're looking forward at the future. Do you know that there are some languages that look forward at the past and look behind to the future?
No. I believe it now that you say it. And I imagine they're probably pretty rad, mystical, like Aborigines, or who is it? I want to know.
It's a lot of it's indigenous tribes and cultures that use that one. The dominant European metaphor of the future being in front of you, because that's the way we're moving. We're
Mhm.
moving towards the future. However, if you think about the sight aspect of it, which do you have a clearer picture of, the past or the future?
Right. You remember it, so you can see it.
Exactly. So, and do you see how talking about the future as either in front of you or behind you might have more consequences? You know,
Totally. Absolutely.
so in English, we think of time as being the
Falling
thing.
into the future.
Exactly. Geronimo, just woo.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a huge change.
Yeah. Now, another example, just to kind of give another like bit by bit. You know, the whole is the glass half empty or is the glass half full thing? Well,
Yeah.
that is a calculus meme because the difference between filling and emptying is the which way is it changing? Is it going up
Hmm.
or is it going down? And dude, babies have an innate understanding of calculus. They can't do the math, they can't like solve differential equations, but they can tell when something is filling up faster than it was before or when something's
Totally.
emptying faster than it was before. And that's calculus.
That's an interesting
Um,
point.
so we're actually rapidly getting to the end of the notes that I made for this. But my intended thesis in this is to destroy the concept of the objective subjective binary. And instead, we should think of truth as lying on an objective subjective spectrum where things might be more or less objectively true and more or less subjectively true, but all truth has aspects of both the objective and the subjective.
Hmm.
Which is not something that the Enlightenment thinkers would have really gotten down with at all. They were
Right.
looking
Totally.
for ground truth.
So how can you have both? How can you have a subjective? Is that just because you have you have something that you're seeing, even if you're seeing it wrong, kind of a thing, because your
Well,
body's sensing it, but you can tell it's there? Or what are you saying?
so let me give you an example. In order to answer the question, am I healthy? You need both objective data and subjective data, because you need the objective data of like, what's my cholesterol? Am I diabetic? Do I got a brain worm? These are all objectively verifiable facts.
Right.
But you also need the subjective data of, do I feel well? Do I feel energetic? Do I feel like I am healthy? And that is inherently subjective, but it's why the doctors ask you, how are you feeling today? Because they need that bit of subjective information to determine whether or not you're healthy.
Interesting. So there's prescriptive and descriptive, and then there's subjective and objective. How does that make up your, as you said, like earlier, kind of this anthropic perspective on reality, right?
Well,
The
so
embodied
one of
circle
the
of
main-
correspondence truth.
Yeah. Language is one of the things that really shows where the rubber meets the road on prescriptive versus descriptive. And you know how one of my favorite things was, in school, we were taught that y'all isn't a word. And us from the South said, we'll see about that.
Yeah. Y'all find out someday, basically. I actually think it became a word around 2003, 2001, sometime in there. Because before that, it was definitely like a useful word in certain places. But isn't it like 2001, 2003, it was actually put into like the Noah's Webster dictionary, right?
Yeah.
So once it's put in the Webster dictionary, and so if Northerners can say dope from Homer Simpson because that's in the dictionary, then I think that's the same justification. Anything less is antebellum prejudice,
Yep. And just like, I was so flattered when the Oxford English Dictionary declared sentient the word weird. I was like, oh, they listened.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, there's some sort of a weird connection between, I don't know if it's even that weird, but just like if you think about British and Dutch Enlightenment and the South, I mean, in the lost Southern generation, I mean, there's a highly intellectual reason for a word like y'all. It's a logical contraction. It's not just it's not something so as foolish as people pretend.
Well, it fills a lexical gap, because in German there's a word euch, euch. And English, the only word that corresponds in person, place, and number and all that to euch is y'all.
Exactly. Yeah, this is another amazing thing, is that English is sort of a pirate trade language anyway. I mean, it's such a weird reduction when people talk about Newspeak in 1984. English in a lot of ways is already that. But why do you think English is so useful? It's become basically the common denominator language.
Because it's a pirate language.
Exactly.
That's just it. The concept of the American melting pot, where we as America are absorbing aspects of other cultures. And now, of course, you have all the ethical questions around appropriation. And sure, there are some real ethical questions around the melting pot approach. But ignoring those for the moment, that's why English has become the new lingua franca.
Right. And it's funny because we'll talk to people from all over the world, and then they'll say that their English is not so good in one way or another. And I'll just be like, that's all right. English isn't so good generally. I mean, it's one of those things where you can understand. So it's a lot easier to understand bad English than almost any other language. If you speak bad German, you speak bad Spanish, you're completely thrown off because it's so meticulous how the grammar is set up. And that's just, barbaric and Romance languages. If you go to like Iceland or Finland, where they have 24 cases, it only gets harder and harder to understand these more precise languages. This pirate language is like Swahili. anyone can kind of just say me hungry, and you're like, yeah, dude.
Well,
You know,
yeah, but so like you're getting real close to something that's relevant to current politics. One of the things that pisses off Trump supporters the most is that African American vernacular English is becoming the dominant dialect of English.
yeah, bro, but Ebonics be fire. You know? That's the thing.
Yeah.
It's really, though, everywhere you go, it's also, what does that mean that's happening? I mean, in school we studied this, and at the time they were saying Ebonics was it's its own language, essentially. You know, it has a method, it has a reason, and it has a rhyme. So there's no reason. I mean, so is it just prejudicial that they're worried about this? I mean,
oh yeah, it's just racism. It's just racism.
Yeah, that's what I feel as well. I mean, because a lot of the time, Ebonics isn't as much a minimalization of the English dialect. It's actually an expansion of the concept. And usually, similarly to incorporating your German thing, they're incorporating French, Polynesian, French Portuguese is often really incorporated into Ebonics in strange ways. Because 40 to 60%, I think it's 60%, of the Western Hemisphere persons of color speak Portuguese. So the confluence of different languages is crazy, right? Like, it's something that we should be considering.
Yeah, but like, just to point out one of the strengths of African American vernacular English, there are two statements I'm about to make that actually mean different things. He's working. He be working. One of those means he is employed and has a job, and the other one means he's at work currently.
Right. Totally. It's like Shakespeare. It's like Shakespeare. Come on. That's
exactly.